What if the most powerful king in the world had to learn humility the hard way? A story so strange, it might just change the way you see power, pride, and God's incredible grace. Let's dive into the story of King Nebuchadnezzar, a man who ruled with an iron fist but was brought to his knees in the most unexpected way. In the ancient world, Babylon was a city like no other. Imagine towering walls, magnificent temples, and an empire that stretched far beyond the horizon. At the center of it all stood King Nebuchadnezzar, the ruler of Babylon. His name was known across every kingdom. He had conquered lands, amassed unimaginable wealth, and built a civilization that others only dreamed of. He sat on a throne of gold, with riches at his fingertips and armies that feared his command. But as powerful as he was, there was something Nebuchadnezzar couldn't control: the future. And that future was about to come crashing into his life in a way he never expected. One night, as King Nebuchadnezzar lay in his luxurious palace, something strange happened. He had a dream so vivid, so unsettling, that it left him wide awake, his heart pounding. The dream was like nothing he'd ever experienced before, strange visions that filled his mind with confusion and fear. But as hard as he tried, the details of the dream slipped away as soon as he opened his eyes. It was haunting. It felt important. Yet the images were a blur. Nebuchadnezzar, shaken and desperate for answers, called in his wise men, magicians, and astrologers, the very best of the best in his kingdom. He demanded that they not only tell him what he had dreamed, but also explain what it meant. But there was a problem. They were clueless. They had no idea what the king had seen. The king's anger grew. "You are supposed to be wise men, the best in Babylon," he roared. "Tell me the dream, or I'll have you all killed." His fury echoed through the grand halls of his palace, and his advisors trembled. No one could answer him. Just when the king had started acting on his threat, a young man, Daniel, a captive from Israel, came up. With calm confidence, he said, "O king, I can reveal your dream with the help of God." The entire room fell silent. How could this young man, a prisoner in a foreign land, know the king's deepest thoughts? What gave him the courage to speak so boldly? Daniel, filled with divine wisdom, stood before King Nebuchadnezzar and began to reveal the dream. He didn't just describe it. He explained its meaning with the clarity of someone who truly understood the mind of God. "O king," Daniel began, "you saw a great statue, towering and magnificent. The head was made of pure gold, shining brilliantly in the light. The chest and arms were silver, strong but not as valuable as gold. The belly and thighs were bronze, representing a kingdom that would rise after yours. The legs were iron, symbolizing yet another kingdom, a kingdom strong and unyielding. But the feet," Daniel paused for effect, "were partly of iron, partly of clay, representing a kingdom divided, fragile, unable to stand forever." As Nebuchadnezzar listened, his mind racing, Daniel continued, "The golden head represents your kingdom, O king. You are the greatest of all kings, the head of gold. But after you, another kingdom will arise, one of silver, and then another, one of bronze, and finally, a kingdom of iron and clay. The statue's feet signify a kingdom that will be broken, and all these kingdoms will eventually fall." Despite the dream that was interpreted, King Nebuchadnezzar's pride couldn't be shaken. In fact, instead of humbling himself, he doubled down on his arrogance. He decided to build a statue, a massive golden idol, 90 feet tall. It was not just a statue, but a symbol of his own greatness, a monument to his power and authority. This wasn't just about an image, it was about control. He ordered that all his subjects, from every corner of his empire, bow down and worship it. Nebuchadnezzar thought to himself, "I am the greatest, and this statue will show the world just how great I truly am." He commanded a grand ceremony with music and fanfare, and declared that whenever the music played, everyone in the empire was to bow down to the golden image. But not everyone was willing to obey. 3 young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who were captives from Israel, refused to bow. They knew that worshiping idols was against their faith, against everything they believed in. They stood strong, even though they knew the consequences would be severe. When the music played, everyone else knelt, but these three men stayed standing, firm in their belief. When word reached the king, he was furious. He called the men to his palace and demanded, "Why do you refuse to bow? I am the king. You will face certain death unless you worship the image I've created." But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood their ground. They didn't back down. They replied, "Our God is able to save us from the fiery furnace. But even if he doesn't, we will not worship your gods or the image you have set up." Their words were clear, a declaration of their unshakable faith. They were not afraid to face death because they knew they served a greater king, a king who was far more powerful than Nebuchadnezzar. Their refusal to bow down was more than an act of defiance. It was an act of trust in God. They knew that the true God, the one who had revealed the dream to Nebuchadnezzar, was the only one worthy of their worship. King Nebuchadnezzar was absolutely furious. He couldn't believe that these three young men, his own people, had defied him. In a fit of rage, he commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. The flames roared higher and higher, and the air became thick with heat. He was determined to make an example of them, to show that no one, not even the mightiest of men, could defy his will. The furnace was so hot, in fact, that when the soldiers threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the flames, the heat was so intense that the soldiers themselves were burned alive. The king watched in horror as the flames swallowed the men. But what happened next shocked everyone. As Nebuchadnezzar peered into the furnace, expecting to see the men consumed by the fire, he saw something unbelievable. Instead of 3 men burning up, he saw 4 figures walking around in the flames, completely unharmed. The fire wasn't touching them. And the 4th man? He looked different, almost like a divine being, like someone sent by God to protect them. Nebuchadnezzar's heart raced and he leaped to his feet. "Didn't we throw 3 men into the fire?" he asked in disbelief. "But I see 4, and they're walking around, completely unharmed. The 4th looks like a god." The king immediately called for the 3 men to be brought out of the fire. As they stepped out, they were completely unharmed, not a hair singed, not even the smell of smoke on them. The crowd gasped in amazement. There was no explanation for this, except for one. The God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had saved them. Despite witnessing the miraculous protection of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, King Nebuchadnezzar's heart didn't change overnight. The events had stunned him, yes, but his pride was too deeply rooted. He couldn't let go of his belief that he was the master of his own destiny, the ruler of all he surveyed. The image of that golden statue he had built still loomed large in his mind, and he was unwilling to acknowledge that there was a power greater than his own. One day, Nebuchadnezzar stood on his palace balcony, gazing out over the sprawling city of Babylon. The sight was awe-inspiring. The city walls, the magnificent gates, the temples filled with gold and jewels. With pride swelling in his chest, he said aloud, "Is this not the great Babylon I have built by my own mighty power, for the glory of my majesty?" But as soon as the words left his lips, something changed. The air seemed to grow thick, and an overwhelming presence filled the room. God had heard the king's boast, and the time had come for him to learn a harsh lesson. In that moment, God struck Nebuchadnezzar down. His mind unraveled, and he was no longer the powerful king who had once commanded the world. He was driven out of his palace, and for 7 long years, he lived in complete madness. His hair grew long and wild, like feathers, and his nails became like claws. He wandered the earth, acting like a wild animal, eating grass just like cattle, as if his dignity had been stripped away entirely. Nebuchadnezzar, the mighty king, was reduced to nothing. His pride had blinded him to the truth, and now he had to learn the hard way that God alone is the true ruler of the universe. After 7 long years of living in madness, the most incredible thing happened. Nebuchadnezzar's sanity was restored. It was as though a cloud had been lifted from his mind, and suddenly he could think clearly again. His transformation wasn't just physical, his heart had changed too. For the first time, Nebuchadnezzar looked around and saw the world with new eyes. He saw the greatness of Babylon, but this time, he didn't see it as his own achievement. He understood that everything he had, everything he was given to him by a higher power. His words were filled with awe and humility as he declared, "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble." Nebuchadnezzar didn't just acknowledge God's power, he honored and praised him, recognizing that it was the Most High who truly ruled over all kingdoms. It was this humble recognition that restored him, not just his mind, but his heart. God had lifted him up from the depths of his pride and madness, and now, with his newfound wisdom, Nebuchadnezzar gave glory to the one true king. As a result, Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom was also restored, his rule was reestablished, and he was able to govern with wisdom and grace, recognizing that true power comes from God alone. King Nebuchadnezzar's journey from pride to humility, from destruction to restoration, teaches us a powerful lesson that applies to all of us. No matter how high we rise in life, whether it's in our careers, our relationships, or even in our own self-worth, we must always remain humble before God. The king's story shows us that even the mightiest of rulers can be brought down, but through humility, they can also be restored. It's not about having everything figured out or being perfect. It's about recognizing that true power, true greatness, comes from God alone. Reflecting on Nebuchadnezzar's transformation, let's ask ourselves, have you ever felt the weight of pride? Or maybe you've struggled with finding humility in difficult moments. We all face those challenges. But what does Nebuchadnezzar's story teach us about how we can approach those struggles? How can we embrace humility, no matter what position we find ourselves in? Take a moment to think about your own life. Are there areas where you could humble yourself before God? Perhaps it's in your relationships, in your work, or in how you handle success. The story of Nebuchadnezzar isn't just about a king. It's a story for each of us, reminding us that no matter how high we go, we must keep our hearts humble before the one who truly rules. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on King Nebuchadnezzar's journey and how humility plays a role in your own life. What lessons have you learned from his story? Have you ever experienced a moment when pride stood in your way, and how did you overcome it?